Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Girivardhari Yashodanandana Prajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Prajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jam Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Stotra Satashi His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Gaur Premanandi Haribo. Okay, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 1, verse number 22. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Puraiva Pumsavadrito Dharajvaro Puraiva Pumsavadrito. One second. Puraiva Pumsavrit Puraiva Pumsavat. Excuse me, my glasses are not so powerful. Puraiva Pumsavatrito Dharajvaro Bhavadbir Amsar Yadusupajanyatam Sayavad Urvya Baram Ishvareshvara Sakala Saktya Kshapayamschared Bhuvi Puraiva pumsa vatrito darojvaro Bhavadbirang sharyadu supajantyatam Sayavad urvya baramishvareshvara Svakala saktya kshapayam charad bhuvi Puraiva pumsa vadrito darajvaro Bhavadbir amshir Bhavadbir amsha yudusupajantayam Sayavad urvya barameshvareshvara Svakala saktya kshapayam charad bhuvi Raiva pumsa Ladies, Pura, even before this, Eva, indeed, Pumsha, by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Avadritaha, was certainly known, Darajvaraha, the distress on the earth, Bhavadbhi, by your good selves, Amshai, expanding as plenary portions. Yadushu, in the family of King Yadu. Upajanyatam, take your birth and appear there. Sa, he, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yavat, as long as. Urvya, of the earth. Baram, the burden. Ishvara Ishvaraha, the Lord of Lords, Svakala Saktya, by his own potency, the time factor, Kshapayan, diminishing, Charat, should move, Bhuvi, on the surface of the earth. Translation. Srila Prabhupada informed the demigods, before we submitted our petition to the Lord, he was already aware of the distress on the earth. Consequently, for as long as the Lord moves on earth to diminish its burden by his own potency in the form of time, all of you demigods should appear through plenary portions as sons and grandsons in the family of the Yadus. Please repeat. Lord Brahma informed the demigods, before we submitted our petition to the Lord, he was already aware of the distress on earth. Consequently, for as long as the Lord moves on earth to diminish its burden by his own potency in the form of time, all of you demigods should appear through plenary portions as sons and grandsons in the family of the Yadus. As stated in the Brahma Samhita, Ramadi Murtishu Kala Niyamena Tishtan Nanavataram Akarod Bhuvaneshu Kintu Krishna Svayam Sammabhavat Parama Pumanyo Govindamari Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. I worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Govinda, who is always situated in various incarnations such as Rama, Nrsimha, and many sub-incarnations as well, but who is the original personality of Godhead known as Krishna, and who incarnates personally also. Sorry, this is Srila Prabhupada's purport. In this verse from Srimad Bhagavatam, we find the words Puraiva Pumsa Vardrito Dara Jvara. The word Pungsha refers to Krishna, who was already aware of how the whole world was suffering because of the increase of the demons. Without reference to the supreme power of the personality of Godhead, demons assert themselves to be independent kings and presidents, and thus they create a disturbance by increasing their military power. When such disturbances are very prominent, Krishna appears. At present also, various demoniac states all over the world are increasing their military power in many ways, and the whole situation has become distressful. Therefore, Krishna has appeared by his name in the Hare Krishna movement, which will certainly diminish the burden of the world. Philosophers, religionists, and people in general must take to this movement very seriously, for man-made plans and devices will not help bring peace on earth. The transcendental sound Hare Krishna is non-different from the person Krishna. Nama Chintamani Krishnas Chaitanya Rasa Vigraha Purna Sudho Nitya Mukto Bhinatvan Namanamino. There is no difference between the sound Hare Krishna and Krishna the person. Amagyanata Brandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurumlitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Hare Krishna. So we can see here how Prabhupada is describing a world overrun by demons, and they're causing great distress. The Lord was already aware of the distress on the earth. So that is the nature of this place, that it's a place for those who are envious of Krishna. Somehow or another we've all been put here, and the only reason we've been put here is because we're envious of Krishna. And you can't really expect very much from this material world. It's not a very nice place. As Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said that this place is no fit place for a gentleman. And as you get older and older, you begin to realize that there are practically no gentlemen in this world. To find a gentleman is very rare. Srila Prabhupada was a gentleman. There are sadhus who are gentlemen. But most people are not gentlemen. They try to assert themselves as gentlemen. They try to appear as gentlemen, but they're not. And it's interesting because when we're born into this world, we're educated in so many different ways. And we get an impression of what the world is, which is actually a completely false impression. Many people think this world is the all-in-all, that people say, you've only got one life, make the most of it, and do whatever you can to have a good time in this life. Very short-sighted. But actually this earth has one sole purpose, and that is it's like a staging ground for souls to find where they belong. So we take birth on this earth, and then according to our activities in this life, when we've reached the human form of life after many animal births, we may go to heaven, we may go to hell, but each time, if we go to heaven, we stay there for some time, then we come back to earth. And then we perform some more activities here, we generate some karma, maybe we go down to hell. And then again we come back to earth when our karma is finished down there. And again we're judged. What are you going to do? So the earth is a pivotal place, it's the center of the universe. The earth is here, this earth plane, and we are put here to prove ourselves. What are we going to do? And continuously we go to heaven, or we go down to hell, or we take birth in animal species. So that's the only purpose of the earth, actually, is just this proving ground to see what are we going to do. Are we going to eventually turn to Krishna, who's here, watching everything? It's amazing how Krishna follows us everywhere. Heaven, hell, he's always there with us, watching us, observing us, just waiting for that moment we'll turn to him. So here we are in this world, and there are so many different schemes, so many different politicians, political parties. We just had an election here in West Bengal, and one political party that was prominent suddenly became much less prominent, and another political party came along and suddenly is becoming prominent, and now there's fighting going on between these two political parties. And one is saying, if you vote for us, your life will be better, and the other is saying, no, if you vote for us, your life will be better. And everyone is claiming that they can make life better for you if you just do what we want. So this is going on. And we wish, some people are so sick of this. They're so fed up with all this fighting backwards and forwards, and everyone wishes, will it go away? Will we ever have a peaceful time on earth? Can we just live our lives and do what we need to do? But no, it's not going to happen. Because the reason why these things are happening the way they are is because the desires of the people are so out of control, and the sinful activity they perform is out of control. And Prabhupada described how as long as people eat meat and maintain slaughterhouses, then they will have to die in wars. Wars will occur simply due to that one fact, that people are eating meat and maintaining slaughterhouses. So one good thing we see, Prabhupada described that by the influence of the Hare Krishna movement, we can change things. Gradually, things on earth can change. And we're seeing how nowadays huge amounts of people in different countries are becoming vegetarians or vegans. We don't necessarily agree with the vegan agenda, but at least they're not eating meat, which is very good. And if they don't eat meat, they don't maintain slaughterhouses, then wars will stop. And people will come more into the mode of goodness. And when people are in the mode of goodness and sattva gun, then they're more receptive to spiritual life. So this is certainly a good thing, and we can attribute this change to Srila Prabhupada's books and to Srila Prabhupada's appearance in this world and to the Sankirtan movement. Because since Srila Prabhupada came, vast amounts of books have been distributed around the world, and they're sitting in so many different places, these books, just waiting for someone to pick them up and read them and change their lives. And so we can understand that much of the changes that are happening in the world now, the positive changes, are all due to the Sankirtan movement. When Prabhupada came to the West, like I remember when he came to London, I was growing up in London in the 60s, and in England when the devotees first came, I first saw them in Oxford Street when I was about 13 or 14. I came up the stairs at the tube station, and there were the Hare Krishna people walking past doing Harinam on Oxford Street, and it was like there some angels from another planet had descended. Because in England in those days, all the businessmen, they wore pinstripe suits and they had bowler hats and they had umbrellas. And everyone had their very strict caste kind of appearance. If you were a worker, you had a flat cap, and there was a kind of a very strict pecking order of people. And people were very conservative and very dull. You know, the diet in England in those days was meat and 2 vegetables with pepper and salt, and that was what everyone ate. And all of a sudden, there are these Hare Krishnas wafting down Oxford Street, just like angels from another planet. I remember seeing them. I was astonished seeing these devotees. And they were giving out bags of popcorn at Prashad. And the people were taking these bags of popcorn, and they were going, what is this? And putting it down on the ledges of the tube station in London. And I was going and picking them all up and eating all this popcorn. There was so many bags of popcorn. It was delicious popcorn. I was eating it like anything. I'm watching these devotees, and I was like, what is this? So when Prabhupada brought Hare Krishna to the West, it was such an alien thing for people in America and for people in the UK and all over the world, apart from here in India. It was such an alien imposition. And yet, somehow or another, it stuck. Now, in England, we're invited to do puja and Diwali in the Houses of Parliament. You know, what to speak of being crazy. And we were regularly arrested when we were doing Harinam in London back in the 70s. We'd get arrested all the time. And now we're invited into the Parliament House to light lamps and offer puja. So things have changed completely. So it's amazing, the influence. We're not actually aware of the influence Srila Prabhupada's movement has had in the world. It's an incredible influence. So, that said, still, there's so much ugra-karmic activity going on in the world. People are enslaved in dead-end jobs which are just completely uninspiring. So many people are in distress, and the economics of the world is getting worse and worse. People are working more and more, but the money that they earn purchases less and less. I met one devotee. He was here a few years ago. He was saying, he was living in Spain. He was saying that I'm just working to pay taxes. That's basically it. People are just trapped into working to pay taxes. And then people are distressed by this whole global warming, climate change, whatever you want to call it. And people are being brainwashed into thinking that that man can destroy mankind. But actually, the fact of the matter is that our power to do anything, to change anything on this earth physically, is very puny. We understand that actually there are millions of demigods which are controlling everything on earth, and the amount of power man actually has is very little. But we do see, you know, sometimes we read these things in the newspaper about climate change or whatever, and we see the climate is weird. Like right now, for instance, the monsoon is like at least a week late, or not 2 weeks late. It's actually officially the monsoon is here. But where's the rain, right? This is the monsoon. Where's the rain? It's not raining. So there's definitely some disturbance going on. So why is that disturbance there? Is it because we're producing too much carbon? Is it because of cow farts? I don't know if you're aware, but some people are saying that the reason why climate change is there because there are too many cows and they're farting too much. And that's why we've got devastating climate change. So we should get rid of the cows. So this is their so-called solution. So they say the problem is carbon. But actually the problem is not carbon, it's karma. Right? That is the problem. Prabhupada describes in a letter to Sir Alistair Hardy in 1973, Prabhupada explains why we experience these weather changes and other disasters. So I'm going to read you this letter. If God is all-powerful, he may not agree, or at least his agency, the material nature, may not agree to give sufficient food to the demons. Demons means godless persons. We get this historical event from Srimad Bhagavatam that during the time of Maharaj Prithu, there was scarcity of food. So the king wanted to punish the earthly deity because she was not supplying food. He wanted to kill her, but the earthly deity replied that she has reduced the supply of food because she did not like to supply the demons. The number of demons is increased, and therefore, by nature, that supply is minimized. As we were discussing that verse from Bhagavad Gita, that the production of food depends on sufficient pouring of water from the sky, that is not in our hands. So Prabhupada makes it clear here. It's not in our hands. The climate is not in our hands. It's beyond anything that we can control. Because we have become godless, because we have stopped sacrifice or yajna, which means to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the supply of rain may be stopped. God may not be angry, but his agents, like the material nature, she does not like to supply, or she does not like to give sufficient foodstuffs to the demons. That is the version of the Vedic literature. So we can understand that, the propaganda is there, that we have to change our lives in so many ways because of this climate change or global warming. And it's true that actually there are many bad things. Yoga karmic activities, Prabhupada used to describe how this is like a nuts and bolts society. Back when Prabhupada was with us in the Bhakti Godhead magazines, regularly there would be articles published where Prabhupada would describe about the Ugra karmic industry, that we're producing nuts and bolts, but we're not producing food. And that people cannot live from nuts and bolts. This industrialization producing the unnecessary necessities of life. Everyone thinks we have to have these things, but they're not helping us. So this Ugra karma is causing so much trouble, not just in terms of polluting, but in terms of enslaving humanity. People are working so hard. Even our devotees have to work so hard in a job, driving to work early in the morning while chanting japa, and then working all day long, coming home in the evening, flopping down in front of the TV. If they're lucky, they can go to the temple on Sunday. And then when they go to the temple on Sunday, they meet the other grihastas and they talk business. What business opportunities are there? So it's like, what time is there for spiritual life? So we're all bound up by this. So many devotees, so many people are bound up in these uber-karmic works. And this, of course, is all because of the, as Prabhupada describes, the activities of the demons, that the demons are becoming so prominent. In Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada says, in 16.9, following such conclusions, the demoniac who are lost to themselves and who have no intelligence engage in unbeneficial, horrible works meant to destroy the world. I remember as a child, I used to go and visit my grandmother. She lived in a very nice countryside in England. And there was one place we used to pass through. And it was full of industrial stuff. There was a dump on one corner. There was a big electrical installation on another corner. There was some old factory on another corner. The whole place was like this one place we would pass through. And I would think to myself, surely people can't like this. Everyone must be doing something to stop this, to get rid of this kind of industry, which is destroying the countryside, which is making the place ugly. And I was thinking that, this is just an anomaly and that people are working to get rid of all this. And then as I grew older, I began to realize that it's getting worse and worse, that there's more industry everywhere, more pollution. Now in Europe, you have mountains of fridges, literally. Old fridges that people have purchased are just ending up in these huge mountains. I once saw a whole valley, like as big as Mayapur, full of truck tires. And this guy, he used to bring these truck tires. He would take the truck tires from people, he would put them in this valley, and late at night, when no one was around, he would burn them all. And there was this massive plume of black smoke which would come up. It was illegal to do that. And what he would do is he would take the metal that was in the middle of the tires, and he would sell the metal for scrap. So the whole valley is full of tires. So this is going on. The world is becoming completely covered in all this rubbish. And even now, even the one thing that sustains us has become ugra-karmic. Farming, the production of food. It's all mechanized, it's all chemicals. The chemicals, the huge factories are there to produce the chemicals that people put into the land to grow our food. And actually, it's getting to the point where farmers are killing themselves. You've probably heard about it. The average farmer in India earns about 1,700 rupees a month, which is not enough to pay the bills. That's the profit that they get. And in between 2014 and 2016, 36,320 farmers killed themselves. That's an average of 33 farmers killing themselves every day. So this is going on. The society has come to the point where even to produce food is not sustainable. So as Prabhupada described, unbeneficial, horrible works meant to destroy the world. This is what's going on. So then Prabhupada explains that by simply chanting Hare Krishna, the transcendental sound Hare Krishna is non-different from the person Krishna, and that the Krishna consciousness movement will certainly diminish the burden of the world. So I mentioned that previously, that we can see that much evidence of that is there, but still there is so much left to do. If you just travel out of Mayapur, as soon as you go out of the gate, recently I traveled to North Bengal with some of the Gurukul boys. We went up to Ekachakra, and then we went up to Kanai Natashala, and we went over to the forest, what's the name of that forest? Jharkhand forest. We went to Jharkhand state. And as we were traveling around, we went through so many towns and so many villages, and so many people who were just engaged in this ugra-karmic activity. No Krishna consciousness. And then, you know, that was just here in North Bengal. All over the world, the amount of temples that are there are very few. There's just a handful of Hare Krishna devotees, a handful of people who are trying to follow Dharma, who are chanting Hare Krishna. And the vast majority of people are completely oblivious. It used to be back in the 60s and 70s that everyone knew the Hare Krishnas because we were everywhere distributing books and doing Harinams. But now there are places where people have never heard of Hare Krishna. So many young people are coming up who don't know anything about Hare Krishna. Our influence in some ways is diminished. So it's a fact that the chanting can change things, but what kind of chanting? And Prabhupada was very much aware of this. Prabhupada was aware of the problems that we faced. And so there was a conversation that Prabhupada had with Satsvarup Maharaj, Hari Shori. I'm going to read you some of this conversation. Prabhupada, the chanting will be there, but you cannot expect that people will chant like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. They cannot even chant 16 rounds, chuckles. These rascals, they're going to become Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? Satsvarup, no, but at least they will chant and take some prasad. Prabhupada, chanting will go on. That is not stopped. But at the same time, the Varnashram Dharma must be established to make the way easy. Hari Shori, well, at least my own understanding was that the chanting was introduced in the age of Kali because Varnashram isn't possible. Prabhupada, because it will cleanse the mind, chanting will not stop. Hari Shori, so therefore the chanting was introduced to replace all of the systems of Varnashram, and like that. Prabhupada, yes, it can replace, but who is going to replace it? The people are not so advanced. If you imitate Haridas Thakur to chant, it is not possible. Satsvarup, we tell them, go on with your job, but chant also. Prabhupada, yes, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu recommended Sthanistita. And if they do not remain in their position, then the Sahajas chanting will come. Just like the Sahajas also have got the beads, and they have got 36 women. This kind of chanting will go on. Like our such and such. He was not fit for sannyas, but he was given sannyas, and 5 women he was attached, and he disclosed. Therefore, Varnashram Dharma is required. Simply show bottle will not do. So this Varnashram Dharma should be introduced all over the world. So Prabhupada makes it clear here that the chanting, yes, the chanting can replace. The chanting can solve all the problems, it's a fact. But it has to be actual chanting. Srila Govinda Maharaj used to sometimes say that this chanting is just like alphabets. Just so many alphabets are coming out. But without actual devotional service, without engaging in the Sankirtan movement, mind, body and spirit, just chanting some rounds in the morning isn't enough. You need to, one whole life needs to be based on the chanting. Everything, we should be constantly, the holy name should be bubbling up in our hearts. And for those of us who are fortunate here to live in Mayapur, then maybe we have more time to chant Hare Krishna and to become absorbed. But for so many devotees in the rest of the world, they have no time because they're struggling for existence. Prabhupada made it so clear, this struggle for existence. We don't have to struggle. If we just engage in simple living and high thinking, there's no need for struggling. You can get everything very easily. So how do we do that? How do we introduce this Varnashram? Well, education is the key thing. It's been shown that education can completely change a society within 1 or 2 generations. It's known that, for instance, back in the early 1900s, many different groups of people, like the tribes in Canada and the United States, and here in India, the British, they changed the educational system in such a way to make the home culture appear to be primitive and backwards, and to promote the Christian culture of the West as being the highest, most elevated thing. And in America and in Canada, they actually forcefully took children away from their families. They took off their traditional clothes that they would wear, they cut their hair, they put them into Western suits, and they forced them to imbibe Western education and philosophy. And then finally, after 10 or 15 years of those children being in those residential schools, when they went home, they couldn't identify with the culture of their parents at all. And the whole thing was very successful. They managed to completely eradicate all these cultural activities of these people. So in the same way, education can be used in a bad way or in a good way. So Satsvarup Maharaj, one time he wrote an article on Gurukul, and he mentioned that one criticism sometimes given is that Gurukul indoctrinates children who are too young to resist the spiritual philosophy. So then he made the point that any kind of method of raising a child is indoctrination. Anything you do to raise a child is an imposition on them that you're imposing. Even if you let them do whatever they like, it's a kind of imposition. So if you give them actual spiritual knowledge, actual awareness of who they are and what they really should be doing, then you're actually helping them. So this is the whole purpose of Gurukul education. And we can actually, sometimes for us, it's very difficult to change our worldview, the way we see things, the way we do things. Worldviews are an unconscious imposition that's been put on us by the educational system that we grew up in. And we're not aware of how it actually controls us and conditions us. It's something that just we automatically accept. We see things the way they are because that's the way we were indoctrinated when we were children. So if we can give our children Krishna-conscious information, Krishna-conscious understanding, how people who are devotees live with each other, how they work with each other, what kind of work that they do, how they cooperate with each other to increase the Krishna consciousness in the world, then when they grow up, that will be their worldview, and they will all have the same worldview. So in this way, then Varnashram can be introduced, because you have a whole generation of children for whom Varnashram is just the way the world is. So like that, we can fulfill Prabhupada's desire. It's not something that can be done in 5 years or 10 years. It's a 30-year, 40-year project, incrementally adding different aspects, changing different aspects of our lives. We ourselves have to be convinced in order to give the children the opportunity to avail of this kind of education. So education is such a very important thing, so that then we live our lives completely in a sattvic environment. We become sattvic. Our lives become full of goodness. And Prabhupada describes that in order to come to the transcendental platform, you have to first come to Sattvaguna. And from Sattvaguna, then it's easy to become Shuddha Sattva, to accept pure transcendental happiness, to experience pure transcendental happiness. But you can't do it until you first come to Shuddha Sattva. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. Any questions or comments? Yes.
We have limited holidays in Mayapur coming from the West, and going back to our countries, at least America and Europe, means going back to living in the city, and then you have to work, at least where I live, at least it's always a 12-hour day to just to have a house and food and be able to go to the grocery store, have when you pull out your debit card and that it works and does what it's supposed to do, So like you said, there's no time for spiritual realization, but at the same time, we're pretty much expected to become Krishna conscious. It's not like we can only stay in Mayapur for a few months at the most, and then we have to go back to the West. So are there people that are able to be Krishna conscious under those circumstances, or is it just kind of a hopeless thing like Tit?
It's very, very difficult, as you described. I remember I used to live in Mayapur, and then I left Mayapur in 98. I left Mayapur in 98. And I decided to go to live with my family in Mauritius and try and develop a Varnashram project, because here in Mayapur, Harikesh had wanted to develop Varnashram, but then Harikesh had his fall down, he left. The services I was doing were taken away, there was no service left. So I thought, okay, let me go and try and do a Varnashram project. So we went to Mauritius, where my family are from, and they had some land. And we kind of compiled a paper, and we convinced the agriculture minister to give us 2 acres of land to do a Varnashram, we said an organic farming project, because there was no organic farming going on in Mauritius. And Prabhupada had mentioned that Mauritius could be the first Krishna conscious country, because it's a small country and it can produce all its own food. So there's the possibility that, and so many people are devotees. So we went and we tried to start. So we got some land, and we were given this 2 acres of land by the agriculture ministry. And my brother-in-law and I, we'd been preaching to different families in Mauritius, and we had a few families said, yes, we're with you, we want to do this Varnashram project. But as soon as we got the land, those other families just disappeared. They didn't turn up. When the hard work started. So my brother-in-law and I started working the land, and we started digging it up, and we started planting potatoes and strawberries and cauliflowers and all sorts of vegetables and different dals and things. And as we were working, my brother-in-law was a disciple of Govinda Maharaj, and he was telling me stuff that he learned from his Guru Maharaj. And many of the things he told me were like a challenge. I hadn't heard them before. And so I was kind of quite surprised. So we're working away, and he's telling me this thing, and I'm going, oh, really? And then I would go home in the evening, I would look at the Bhagavatam, and I'd say, oh yeah, Prabhupada said that. And then the next day we'd go out and we'd talk, and he'd say something else, and I'd go, really? And then I'd come back and check. And like this, Prabhupada describes how on that last one, when Prabhupada's lying on his bed in Vrindavan, and Jayadvaita Maharaj is holding the microphone, Prabhupada's describing how association of devotees is so important. By living and working together, you cultivate knowledge. So later on I realized that when my brother-in-law and I were working that piece of land, he was telling me all about what he'd learned from his Guru Maharaj. We were cultivating knowledge. And it gave me so much understanding of Krishna consciousness. Just working with him on the land, making our own food, and talking about Krishna. It was actually very blissful. So anyway, various things happened, and that project didn't work out. But for me, it was a really important thing I began to understand. Then later on I moved to Spain, and I tried to start another project there called Madhuvan. and we tried to create an eco-village there. And there I found that people, because many of our devotees had different upbringings and different worldviews, it was very difficult to work together because there would be people who would seemingly have the same kind of idea. Like one devotee came who was expert on organic farming. He knew everything. He knew the names of all the plants. He knew what to do when. So I thought, great, you can come along. But he'd been growing up in a Christian place, and he wanted to have Christian kind of symbology as opposed to things that remind you of Krishna. He wanted to have like a snow goose or something as a symbol, which was... And we started clashing on these kind of little silly points. And I began to realize that, you know, in the 60s, many people started creating farm communities, the hippies. But most of those farm communities died out very quickly. Within 5-10 years, they died out because the ideology, everyone's ideology was different. There was always conflict. There was no kind of ideological glue holding people together. Then eventually I came back here to Mayapur and I realized that you need to have children that have grown up with the same worldview, the Krishna conscious worldview, based on Varnashram Dharma, simple living and high thinking. Then you can get Varnashram to work, because then there'll be no conflict. And I'm seeing how teaching in the Gurukul, the boys all work together, and once they've got over their kind of influences from their previous time before they came to Gurukul, they just start working together and they're happy, enthusiastic, doing all sorts of menial services. And Prabhupada described the children are happy in any circumstance, and we can see that. They're sweeping, they're cleaning, they wash their own clothes, they prepare all the vegetables, they cook all their own food, and yet they're happy. And when we go preaching, traveling, people are very impressed seeing that. So this is the way in which we can actually change everything. The whole world can be changed. The British understood that. Now everyone in India is running around in a suit and tie, right, trying to be like an American or an Englishman because of the British education. Before that, India was known to be one of the most prosperous places in the entire world. Vedic culture was everywhere. People were happy. The place was thriving. And now everyone's struggling because they've all adopted Western culture because of the education the British imposed. So like that. So Prabhupada, when he came to the West, what did he do? One of the first things once we had devotees was farm communities and gurukuls. And the idea was the devotees would work together on the farms, produce all our own food. And when you produce your food, it takes 3 months to produce that food. And then you've got the rest of your time for chanting Hare Krishna and associating. So why wouldn't you want to do that? But because we become so attached to our TVs and our stereos and our modern, nice, fancy cars and the air conditioning and all these things, we believe that that's better. But then we end up getting cancer or some other disease, and we die early, miserable death. And, you know, the association we get with devotees is so less. So Prabhupada gave us the solution. The solution is there, and it will work. But you have to have faith. We have to have faith that it will work. And we have to try and find like-minded devotees to work together, to get together somehow or another, find a place to do this. Actually, for your information, just in case you might be interested, apparently Putin in Russia has offered anyone who wants 5 hectares of land, they can come to Russia. If they can make that 5 hectares of land work, they can keep it and they can get citizenship. So it's an opportunity there. If you want to go to Russia, then you can get a piece of land, 5 hectares of land, and if you can work that land and make it viable within 5 years, the land is in your name, you become a citizen. So there's an opportunity. Vast amounts of land are available. Okay. Anyone, any other question? Just got a minute or two. Yeah.
Well, about the cow slaughter.
Sorry?
You were saying something about cow slaughterhouses. So, I think there are very big devotees in ISKCON connected, billionaires, and so why don't we purchase big lands and then purchase all the cows from the slaughterhouses and put them there and maintain them? I don't see so much cows everywhere, cow protection in ISKCON, so much.
Well, you know, the whole cow slaughter thing is like kind of undercover. You know, around here, for instance, apparently there are people, I've heard stories that people are taking herds of cows across the border to Bangladesh and stealing cows and all sorts of stuff. So this is going on. So it's not something that's easy to regulate. I mean, what you say is a good idea. And devotees are doing that. There are actually people who are creating goshalas. But people are breeding cows to slaughter them. So it's a very big issue. And, you know, people like Modi are trying to change it, and different states are trying to change it. So stuff is going on. There is hope, but it takes time.
Not only in India, but all the other countries, Western countries.
Yeah, well, in the Western countries it's much more difficult. But again, because people are becoming vegetarian and because they're becoming vegan, the awareness is going on, and it just requires more education. And then eventually, when the demand is not there, then the industry stops. It's all based on demand. So if the demand stops, and actually it's going on, the industry is suffering now because so many people are becoming vegetarian and vegan. So good influences are there, but a lot more work needs to be done. Okay, thank you very much. Hare Krishna.